Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by Royal Retros, the king of throwbacks. Hey, if you're looking for teams and leagues that don't exist anymore, but you'd like to remember them in high-quality jersey or uniform format, hey, some of those teams were legendary. Some of them were disasters, but they all live at Royal Retros. Check them out. RoyalRetros.com. Use that promo code SEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. Check them out now. And now, check out this episode.
Negro Leagues baseball was so popular that black churches would move their service time up an hour so fans could go to the game. If you know anything about the black church, you don't mess with service time.
There were African American professional ball players in the 19th century.
But segregation starts to tighten its hold.
Well, what do?
We can do this on our own.
A few entrepreneurs see that a black club can be a successful business.
Rube Foster.
Light years ahead of his time.
Effa Manley.
The first lady of black baseball.
Negro Leagues players made the game more up-tempo, bunt and run.
Base stealing. These incredibly acrobatic catches.
The major leaguers would say that the Negro Leagues didn't play the game the right way. Really, that was saying they didn't play the game the white way.
It's you and me against the world.
Wherever you had successful black baseball, you typically had thriving black economies.
You have vendors and you have advertising. You know, people were making money from it.
But integration was going to kill their businesses.
It was good morally, but that progress came at a cost.
White fans saw a kind of baseball they had never seen before.
The great ball players of the leagues.
Jackie Robinson.
Buck Leonard.
Satchel Paige.
Willie Mays.
Cool Papa Bell.
Hank Aaron.
Oscar Charleston.
Joshua Gibson
would transform the game.
They are a part of a movement. Before we coined the term civil rights movement.
Man, they didn't care about making no history. They just wanted to play ball. But the pride, the passion, the courage in the face of adversity, that's the real story.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right, settle down, everybody. How are you? It's Good Seats Still Available. My name is Tim Hanlon. I am your humble and congenial host. This is our little podcast journey each and every week into what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us. Hope your Memorial Day weekend is going just great. And I appreciate you sitting back and putting us in your earbuds for another fun-filled episode as we this week go back to a topic that has been very good to us over our 7+ years of existence, and that's the story of the Negro Leagues. But we're going to go beyond and above that to incorporate sort of the broader story of black baseball in America with our guest this week, Dr. Gerald Early. He, the Merle Kling Professor of Modern Letters at Wash U in St. Louis, wonderful institution down there in St. Louis, where he specializes in things like African-American literature and culture and sports and jazz and various doings in and around those subjects. But you may also know of that name from various credits, both on screen and behind the scenes, at a lot of great documentaries over the last number of years. I think you'll see him on screen with a great documentary from 2021 about the life and times of Dean Martin called The King of Cool. You will know that Gerald was an advisor and contributor to many Ken Burns joints, if you will, especially in the realm of sports, like the Muhammad Ali series, which was awesome. I just finished watching that a couple of weeks ago, even though it came out a number of years ago, as well as the opus that Ken Burns is probably most well known for, his breakthrough series on, and we love, of course, baseball, the 9-episode opus that also had a 10th inning a few years later. I know Gerald was on screen for that one, but I know he contributed quite a bit behind the scenes prior. But that's kind of our adjunct this week as we talk about the story of black baseball in America. And as I hinted at, it certainly the Negro Leagues play an integral component in that story. But as we'll talk about with Gerald in a few moments, the story of black Americans and baseball starts way before that, all the way back to the earliest days of the history of the sport itself in the mid 1860s, for a number of reasons, and certainly continues today beyond that. And again, the coming and going of the Negro Leagues themselves is itself an intriguing story, because it recognized that that there's opportunity both business-wise and player-wise and culturally at the time, in the absence of black Americans being able to play this game that was so essential, I guess, to the American story, the American pastime, if you will. There are reasons for that. We'll get into that. But then, the beginning of the end of those leagues, certainly when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in the early 40s by joining, quote unquote, organized baseball, and the many years thereafter. But, the story certainly continues with not only Jackie Robinson's breakthrough and his struggles, but the overall struggles of the African-American community in the 1960s with civil rights, right? Hugely traumatic for the evolution of this country. And frankly, things like free agency in baseball itself, right? Without Curt Flood, he himself, an African-American, he was instrumental and crucial and a lot of very sacrificial to an endeavor to ultimately win out and earn free agency, not only for black Americans, but for all players playing baseball, right? So lots of amazing contributions, a lot of polyglot stories that sort of make up the fabric of the sport of baseball. And again, this book, Play Harder, is a true treasure of a book. It's also, I think I may have mentioned before, is an exhibit at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum as well. So the book and the exhibit kind of go hand in hand together, and I highly encourage you to visit and or buy both of them. And as they say, you'll be glad you did, and then some. And as you'll hear in our conversation coming up with the good doctor, I also do want to make a Negro League a baseball cap tip to the setup for the show, which is from a documentary that I do not believe Gerald was part of, but it, to me is also well worth seeking out as part of all of the story, and sets the tone, I think, very well. It was called The League. It's simply called The League, and it came out in 2023. It was directed by Sam Pollard. It was co-written by one of our previous guests, Byron Motley. Check out that old episode, I think in the hundreds, 115 or so, or I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, when we talked about his father's story being an umpire in the Negro Leagues, and I think even in organized baseball as well, if I remember correctly. But I think that was also executive produced by the very busy Questlove, who's done a ton of documentaries over the last couple of years, just all really good. But that clip came from that episode, and I think you can rent it on Prime Video, but you can actually stream it on Hulu if you're a subscriber, or if you really want to hack and save some bucks altogether and not pay for it at all you got to do is go to Canopy, K with a K, Canopy, or Hoopla. These are two sites, if you don't already know, are tied to your public library. And if you have a library card from your local public library, you can watch tons of great streaming offerings, including this great film, The League, right there on your TV set, just by entering your library card. So why pay anything, if you will? Why pay more? You can watch The League, and it's, again, available through those sites as well as Hulu and Prime Video for renting and buying, if you choose to pay for such as that means of consumption. But anyway, I digress, but not for for good reason. And let's get into our conversation now with Gerald Early as we talk about sort of the larger and longer arc of black baseball in America. It's I learned a lot, as I always do in these conversations, and I encourage you to sit back and please enjoy. For our audience, give us a little bit of background about you, because you wear multiple hats in this story, and I'm curious as to maybe how you sort of literally got into it beyond or concurrent with the proverbial day job?
It started for me in 2022. That's when I was contacted by the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, asking me if I would be willing to be a consultant, one of their consultants for revamping their exhibit on Black baseball, um, and which at that time was called Ideals and Injustices. They had changed the name a few years earlier. It had been called I think the Pride and the Passion, something like that. And so
that sounds like a more major work of literary or Pride and whatever. There you go.
Yeah. And so I said, sure. That sounds like that would be really interesting. So I was one of five people, consultants. And so the job was originally that we were going to help them rethink the exhibit because they really wanted to update the exhibit. The biggest point they wanted to make when we started having our meetings was that they wanted the exhibit to be told from a Black perspective or a Black point of view. They didn't want to have this sense of a white curator or a team of curators who were telling this story, but rather that it was coming out of the Black experience and all the voices in it would be Black and that sort of thing. And so we met pretty regularly. And the meetings would always take place on a weekend. So we would meet all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then go home on Sunday. So they were pretty exhausting meetings. And so it really wasn't updating the exhibit as much as it was reinventing the exhibit because the exhibit was completely changed. And so that's how it got started. There was discussion about having a book go along with the exhibit, but it was very amorphous. There wasn't anything really concrete about it except, oh yeah, I think it would be good to have a book go along with the exhibit.
Before we go further, though, give our audience a sense, though, of why you're getting a call in the first place, because you're obviously qualified on a number of different levels to be invited into this small.
Yes, I think part of it was that I had gotten noted as someone who had some expertise in race and baseball because I was in Ken Burns's documentary about baseball. So that was one way.
Oh yeah, just that little thing. Sure.
So that was one thing that I think gave me some legitimacy. Also I think they wanted someone who was a professor of African American studies. I think they thought, oh, that would give another level of legitimacy to have that because they had two professors of history who were part of the exhibit. And I think they wanted to have a professor of African American studies. So I think that was another thing that gave me some legitimacy, or, they felt that I could be useful to them. And I think they might have been thinking about possibly me writing this book that they were thinking about. So I think that was another reason for reaching out to me, was that they thought of the consultants that they had. I mean, there were several people there who were capable of writing a book. They were thinking that I might be the best candidate for them to write a book. So I think it was a combination of those factors that led them to me and to asking me to do this. So the talk about the book, at first it was a very amorphous idea. So at first it was thought, oh, the book would be a collection of essays and all the consultants would write an essay, and then, we would get some other people to write essays and that sort of thing. But, as time went along with discussion about the book, I felt that, I think it's better if we have some kind of narrative history and we could intersperse some essays, but it would be better if the book were a narrative history. I think people would be more inclined to read it if it was a narrative history, chapter one, chapter two, and it's just marching chronologically. I think people would be more inclined to read it than to have a bunch of essays. And I think people would be more inclined to read it if there's one major uh, authorial voice in the book. I think people would prefer that. So that's ultimately what happened. So, the we did the exhibit, and we said the rules were that it had to be from a Black perspective. The rule was also it was another rule that we had to um, make sure that we had Black people fans talking about the game. That was mentioned several times, that you needed to have not just players talking about the game, but Black fans talking about what baseball meant to them. So that was something that was added to the exhibit that hadn't really been there before, about having fans talking about the game. It's also mentioned about.
I apologize. Let me interrupt you there, though. Why the I won't call it suddenness, but what was the why the ask in the first place, both in terms of timing and the why of that question? Because I guess the question there is, why wasn't the authentic Black point of view and or experience part of the original process when the exhibit was originated?
Oh, I think it was. I mean, I think they had, some Black people involved with it. But I think it was political, particularly after the George Floyd thing. And I think it was after that, and the rise of Black Lives Matter and so forth. I think the museum felt an urge to want to update this thing and really try to respond to to that particular moment. And so I think that had a lot to do with it, with just the political mood of things, and that the exhibit needed to be less like, oh, this seemed like something that was more put together by white experts, and to have the exhibit seem more like it was something that had a strong Black voice in it. I think that was something that was important to them, but I think it had to do with the political moment.
Was this also concurrent? Was this also concurrent with the movement to ultimately get the major leagues of Black baseball, the Negro Leagues, major leagues of such, the records incorporated into?
Yes, this is concurrent with that. Yes.
Because I mean, look, we had a couple of conversations on that with some various statisticians and stuff over a couple of years ago when it happened, and you could not talk about a greater injustice rectified than that. And I can't imagine that there wouldn't be more of a symbiotic relationship with that, along with this reimagined, I guess, exhibit.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the word, kind of injustice, I think it was the idea that we really want to do Black people justice with this exhibit. The hall doesn't get very many Black visitors. Only a very small percentage of Black people go to Cooperstown to see the hall. I don't know if this exhibit will make that much of a difference in that regard, but they want to do outreach. It's very important to know they want to do outreach in the schools in the area and stuff like that. They want to do outreach with Black people in the area, with Black students in the area, and the like. That's important part of their mission. So I think that had to do as well with really wanting to reimagine the exhibit by doing everything we did to reimagine it and reconstruct it. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. So it's responding to political things, and that's not unusual. I mean, museums are creatures of the societies in which they exist. And so, yes, of course, part of it is responding to a political moment. And so that was part of it. So we worked on the exhibit, and, The other thing was, oh yeah, to the other rule we had was that it was not we were not to in any way suggest that black people in playing baseball were in any way imitating white people. That, in other words, black baseball was not a shadow institution of white baseball. Black baseball had to be understood on its own terms in its own way, and not in some way in relation to white baseball. So that was something else that was emphasized when we were doing this. And so, we went ahead and, we had meetings and so forth. The curators were great. I mean, they're very dedicated people. They worked really hard on this. And found a lot of artifacts. We talked about the artifacts that would be part of the exhibit and all that sort of thing, and photographs and, things of this nature, and, who would get emphasized and who wouldn't. And of course, Jackie Robinson is kind of linchpin figure because he takes us out of the Negro Leagues and into integrated baseball. So, he would get a major spot in the exhibit and all this sort of stuff. I should add that the exhibit space is only 620 square feet. So it's not very big. This, the actual footage is not very big. And of course, at first, we had put so much stuff in there that we would have taken up half the museum if let us do everything that we were talking about doing. But the other thing in updating the exhibit was to have interactive stuff so that young people would find it more attractive, and to get away from the book on the wall type of thing that, museums used to do, but they really can't do that anymore because it's not attractive to people, and it's certainly not attractive to young people. So, there were technological updates and more visual type of stuff to make it more interesting to younger people.
Well, the thing I really loved about this book, which I'd imagine is maybe more of an embellishment, I guess, perhaps of that limited square footage, is the manner in which obviously there's a sort of a timeline kind of basis to the setup of the book, the early through today, which by the way, I thought was also very telling, because it didn't just sort of focus on the quote unquote Negro Leagues, right? There's the before, the during, and the very much thereafter, in which I wouldn't even call it a notion, the ideal of black baseball, if you will, that's you want to call it, it's a thread, it's a river, it's a flowing component, right, of what this quote unquote game of baseball was, is, and is becoming, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, well, that's just and I haven't been to the exhibit yet, so we'll get to that in a second. But I loved how you started, or the book starts, right, in that it doesn't sort of even focus on something you would think is obvious, like Jackie Robinson or the Negro Leagues and that kind of stuff. But you actually give some homage to a black sports writer / broadcaster. Now, I grew up in the New York area, so wait for it. The Art Russ Jr. quotes and stuff, right? Which to me, it almost transcends it, because you were talking about it before. The desire of the rethinking of this was to be around not only the players, the one-way, the description of what was going on with the players and the leagues and stuff, but of the fans, and I would say by extension, the coverage through the eyes of the African-American experience, right? So you could not have picked a better person, I think. And again, I grew up in New York, was very familiar with Art Russ Jr., so I'm a little biased, I guess, in that respect. But to me, it's almost an exquisite way to kind of start, because it kind of blends that together. Somebody who's reporting on and grew up with and shared the game of baseball with audiences, both black and otherwise.
Yeah, well, that was the plan. Art Russ had been somebody, I wanted to open the book with not a player, but somebody who loved a black person who loved the game, who was not a player. And Art Russ was perfect for me to do that. And he had, exquisite quotes to be able to do that.
He was really something. It took me a while. Even I remember listening to him on the old WABC radio, even when they were doing sports at nights and they're still doing music. And I didn't even know he was black until, I don't know. he just transcended. He was inquisitive and eloquent, and you could tell he had been a writer in his past or at the same time. But it's just, there you go.
Well, you have decoded that was very intentional to do that. It was very intentional on my part to start the book with somebody or a Black person who loved baseball who was not a player. So that was very intentional.
So put all this in perspective, though, right? So I mean, it's hard not to be a tad bit cynical here in that the way you've described this project, it almost feels, and I don't want to put words in the baseball hall's mouths nor put you on the spot, but it almost feels sort of, I don't know, reactionary, if you will, and almost like trying to, I don't know, make amends or something, right? I would imagine that the goal would be to elevate what has always been sort of maybe too latent, if you will, in the story of baseball and the contributions thereof. I mean, I would have imagined that back in the 90s when you were consulting Ken Burns on the baseball documentary that, Buck O'Neill and a lot of people, that generation, frankly, who would they almost discovered that there were these Negro Leagues because of that documentary, right?
Yeah,
it just feels to me like the baseball hall would have been a little bit further along, maybe in the 2020s, that this reimagining with a more authentic voice would have already been well underway.
Well, I can't quite speak to that, not working for the hall. I do think they occasionally did little updates of the exhibit, but this was a total rethinking, a total reimagining of it. And perhaps it was a little late in the game, or they wanted to make up for something. That's very possible. I think that a lot of it does. I think, as I told you before, a lot of it, I think, was responding to a particular political moment, and the hall really wanting to make the exhibit speak and mean something for today. And I think particularly to speak and mean something for Black visitors who would come. I mean, it speaks to anybody who would be there, but I think particularly to make outreach to potential Black visitors and also to Black players, because there were a lot of Black ex-players who were on there was a larger advisory board, and it was several Black ex-players like Dave Stewart and Ozzie Smith and people like that who were on it, Ferguson Jenkins, people like that who were on it. And I think it was also meant to be something to create something that would be, in fact, pleasing to them and honoring them in a particular kind of way. So I think that there was several things that they wanted to try to achieve that drove them to do this, and having those Black ex-players supporting it, and they came out in big numbers when they had the grand opening of it. I mean, the place was full of Black ex-ball players. I think that meant a lot to the hall. I think it was a huge achievement for the hall to get those Black ex-players really behind the exhibit and really excited about the exhibit and really feeling the exhibit was important. I mean, I think some of them were genuinely moved by walking through the exhibit. So I think that was an important component for the hall as well.
It's interesting. The reason why the Negro Leagues in particular are especially fascinating to me, and again, my entree into all this is somewhat tangential from my sort of love and passion for things that are ephemeral or no longer with or whatever, but are still part of the history of sports that people sadly overlook. Some of them quirky and ridiculous, but other things more essential, right? And the fact that it took a baseball documentary in the 90s to kind of even surface this notion that there was actually a thriving African-American culture to the sport is revelatory, right? Especially to, the white sports fans who kind of grow up with the game and just, either or today even just take it for granted because it's so well integrated today. But to know that there were these leagues that were like literally parallel, arguably not parallel, right? But the idea of barnstorming and people like Rube Foster and Effa Manley who are like, business entrepreneurs that, kind of built almost a secondary baseball industry, if you will, almost unbeknownst, frankly, probably mostly unbeknownst to most non-African American baseball fans. And it's striking to me how many people still don't sort of recognize the richness of all of that. And I think that's what strikes me in this book is like, this is almost like I wouldn't call it a hidden sport almost, but it almost feels, for those who weren't paying attention, this is just a wellspring of amazing culture and activity and statistics that this basically just scratches the surface of.
Yeah, I mean that's all very true, and I think that the Hall wanted to, I think, try to redo the exhibit to tell what you just said better, to make people understand that a little bit better about how major it was. I remember when I was working with Ken Burns with that documentary, one of the first things he said to all the consultants who were there, John Thorne and Bill James and all these other people, he said, in my film, I'm going to make the Negro Leagues equal to the major leagues. They're not going to be some kind of subsidiary, some kind of, oh, this is what the black people were doing across the tracks or something like that. They're going to be treated the same, and they're going to be treated equally to the major leagues. And everybody was fine with that, on board with that and everything else. I'm not saying that the Hall didn't do that in the past with the earlier exhibit, but I think they really wanted to emphasize that a lot with the new exhibit, that, this is this major thread in American culture, and you really can't understand baseball, professional baseball in this country, without having a full understanding that Black people built a whole separate industry that worked pretty well, and that even had moments when it really thrived, and that they did it under conditions that were not ideal. Far from it.
Yeah, and truly in the shadow, if you will. I mean, playing in the same stadiums when the major league teams were not around, and yet they were in the same stadiums as these teams, right? So it's a kind of a double-edged sword there, right?
They were in the same stadiums. Yeah, exactly. They were playing on the same kind of fields. They were playing with the same dimensions, and so forth. And Major League Baseball profited from renting out those stadiums to Black baseball teams, and so there was money to be had. There was money to be had in the old days of segregation, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize or understand, that in fact in the old days of segregation there were white people who made money from it, and that was one of the ways they made money from it, was renting out. But with Black baseball, was renting out those stadiums, because very few Black teams had their own stadiums.
Right, and then the whole barnstorming phenomenon and all that kind of stuff. What's your take on the Negro Leagues component of this story? Right, I mean, there's an entire museum in Kansas City devoted to that league's part of this story, right? And I think rightly so, by the way. I think just the fact that you get that granular and have the East-West All-Star. I mean, there's lots of different things that emanated just in that sort of zone alone. But I'm always curious, and I try to bring this up in similar conversations. Did it take actual, let's call them challenger leagues, to kind of force the issue with Major League Baseball over time, and ultimately integrate and incorporate and bring into the fold the quote unquote organized baseball thing into, I mean, because I think we kind of just said it, we kind of just danced around it. I mean, the fact that these leagues existed just out of sheer will and entrepreneurial spirit, showed that there was an audience. It showed the country that there was an appetite for baseball of a much more broad interpretation, cities as well as the players that played it. But it would be hard to imagine this story without having. I mean, it's intriguing to me that it took these leagues and all the blood, sweat, and tears to make them happen. It feels to me like it helped force the issue to baseball to pay attention and include.
Yeah, I think the leagues did that. I think the leagues were set up. I mean, Rube Foster made this very clear that the leagues were set up in part to develop Black players who would be good enough to play in the major leagues. So one of the messages that the Black leagues were sending out was that we have the wherewithal to actually develop players, and we can do that. We can develop players who can play in the league. That's very important to that. Black people were thinking, yeah, we got the wherewithal to do that. We have some medical schools, so we have the wherewithal to develop doctors. We got a couple of law schools. We got the wherewithal to develop lawyers. We can develop ball players. And this might not have seemed terribly important to a lot of Black people, thinking, well, we doctors and lawyers, I can understand we need that. I don't know if we need ball players. But it was important in sending a certain kind of message in the culture itself about being able to develop ball players. So you develop two things with the leagues. You develop ball players, and as you said, you develop a fan base. And you develop, and the fan base is fed by the Black press. The Black press becomes enormously important in this story because the Black press sells the game to the Black public because they build up the players and they build up the game and so forth. So it's not possible without having a Black press doing this. And so you got Black fans out there who can support the game and who love the game and so forth. So the league is doing a lot of interesting cultural work. And yeah, it's putting pressure. It's taking longer than it should, but it's putting pressure on Major League Baseball for how long can you hold out with a segregated game. And after all, they were playing, the Negro League players were playing against white all-stars for many years and won most of those games that they played against the white Major League All-Stars.
Oh, sure. And not necessarily touted by the white press either.
Yes, exactly. And so people knew all of this. It was just a matter of time before the pressure was going to mount to the point where the leagues were going to have to have Black players in it. The World War II probably pushed the envelope because of the whole issue of fighting for democracy and everything, which Black people played up. We're going out here fighting for democracy, against Hitler and against the Japanese and so forth. But a Black man can't play baseball here. I mean, World War II was part of the beginning of the dismantling of essentially an apartheid that was here in this country. And baseball was a very important symbol in undoing that when it finally got integrated. But it wouldn't have been possible to have integrated it if the Negro Leagues hadn't existed and they hadn't developed players who could play. So Black institutions were totally essential. In this instance, Black institutions were totally essential to bringing about integration. And that Black people had to use their own entrepreneurship and everything else in order to bring this about, because they had to have the players ready to be able to play. So it's an incredible story. I think that people maybe haven't. It's a shame that people don't fully understand the nature of the story. It's an incredible story.
All right, what's this? Royal Retros. All right, longtime fans of this show may remember a little site that we used to promote the heck out of called 503 Sports. Well, not only are they still around, they are now known as Royal Retros. RoyalRetros.com, the king of throwbacks. And like the name implies, the highest quality jerseys and hats and apparel and all kinds of stuff related to various teams and leagues and situations that we love to obsess about here on this show. And I'm talking about getting jerseys with your name and number on the back of them, customized to your liking for the WHA or old NHL hockey teams that may not exist anymore. Perhaps it's a Federal League team from way back or a Negro League team. Maybe you're just enamored with the various football leagues of the past, like the Arena League or the All-American Football Conference or the original UFL, United Football League. Yes, you can get all of those teams in all kinds of colors, away jerseys, home jerseys. You want to put your name on them. You want to make sure you got the official patch on the side. All of those things and more at RoyalRetros.com. And I'm not kidding, friends. You go there, you want to find that Cleveland Barons jersey to wear and show. Hey, you're maybe a Colorado Avalanche fan and you want to represent the Quebec Nordiques from where they came in the arena to show your heritage and your love and knowledge of the history of that franchise. You can do that and more. And I'm talking across football and basketball and baseball and hockey and you name it. All kinds of great stuff for you to find and buy and purchase and wear proudly from Royal Retros. That's RoyalRetros.com. And of course, we have a promo code for you. We want to save you money from all these great things. And here's that code. It's SEATS, SEATS, promo code SEATS for all of your purchases at RoyalRetros.com. Check them out. You'll be glad you did. We love them. And our friend Destin Alameda there out in Portland, Oregon, we appreciate his and their sponsorship of this show. And now, back to our conversation. Obviously, you touch on the obvious pivots and players and personalities in here. The FM Manleys and the Rube Fosters and the leagues and so and obviously notable turning points in history like the Hank Aarons of the world, et cetera, and the Michael Jordan doing the multi-sport thing, et cetera. Are there what did you in the process? Did you and your colleagues discover, unearth, perhaps find somebody who was maybe a little bit lesser known that maybe had an outsized impact that maybe people truly overlook in this story? Or did you discover anything new or a nuance that maybe you weren't expecting going into this?
Part of the reason for having what you might call the usual suspects was because in a book like this, people would be wanting the usual suspects. So that's part of it. I would say that insofar as finding stuff off the beaten track, I would say largely the stories about the transnational aspect of it, and Black people and Black American players playing in Mexico and in Cuba and so forth, and those players playing in the United States. That's not an unknown story by any means, but it was important to kind of bring up this transnational aspect of the game. So in other words, the game almost became kind of like a Black diaspora here in this hemisphere, with people playing it. So what was interesting to me in the book was when I wrote about the brown player meets the Black player, or whatever the chapter is called, and that I think I opened up that chapter talking about Felipe Alou, I think, as I remember.
Yes, and correct. And that's exactly where I thought you were going to go with this answer. Indeed, no doubt.
Jackie Robinson, that he's saying, well, Jackie Robinson breaking the color line made it possible for me to think about being a major league ball player in the United States because I'm as dark as he is. And so by his doing that, he opened up the gates for me and for, Minnie Minosa and a whole bunch of other folks. And so it had this kind of transnational effect that that's not I didn't bring out something that was new, but I wanted to bring out something in that whole chapter about the relationship between Latino players and Black American players that I thought had not been talked about as much as it could have been. And the whole thing with Mays and the Giants, because they were a highly diverse team in the late 1950s and early 60s, I thought was an important point to bring out because Mays is often seen as some kind of I don't want to say an Uncle Tom, because um, he wasn't as political, or he wasn't as outspoken as Jackie Robinson or somebody. But I thought it was important to talk about that relationship, which I don't think gets talked about as much as it should be, about about the Latino guys on the team and Al Dark and everything. I thought that was an interesting story, and I wanted to put Mays. That was a very important story for me because I wanted to put Mays in a different kind of light in relation to those people. It wasn't a story that was meant to say, "Oh, Mays was actually activist and you didn't know it," or something like that. But to talk about the particular kind of pressures that was on him, and also that the Latino players looked to him for some kind of leadership. And it wasn't that he didn't quite give that leadership. He didn't give the leadership in quite the way some of them wanted it. That was an important story to me. As I said, it's not a new story, but it was a story that I felt should be emphasized and wasn't originally going to be in the book. And I decided to add it. What happened was it got in the book because we had to swap out something because there was a strict word limit with the book. I had originally written a chapter in the book about Jackie Robinson's court-martial when he was in the Army. I'd written a long chapter about that and his friendship with heavyweight champion Joe Louis when he was in the Army.
Sure.
And then which was something that isn't as well known as it should be, is his friendship with Joe Louis. Then, because at first the book was not going to have anything about Latino players in it. That was the original concept. Then as I'm doing the research, working on the book and everything else, I said, nah, that's not working for me. Latino players and their relationship with Black American players is really important. I can't not deal with that. So then that's when this other chapter came up about the Black player meets the brown player. But the word limit was that, okay, you basically you're faced with a choice. We can either do the Jackie Robinson court-martial thing or the Black player meets the brown player, but we can't do both. And so everybody kind of opted for, okay, let's do the Black player meets the brown player meets the Black player, and we'll take out the Jackie Robinson court-martial thing. So that's kind of how that happened, but I felt it was essential to have that in there. And it was essential for me to present Mays in the book in a way other than just talking about, okay, the guy was a great player and all that kind of stuff and blah, 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 but to present him in another kind of light. Also, I thought it was important to present him in the way he was presented because Jackie Robinson did not approve of him. And I wanted that to be made clear in the book that Jackie Robinson didn't approve of him and that Jackie Robinson may not have been entirely fair to Willie Mays in the way that he did not approve of him and the way he presented him in baseball has done it. So I wanted to get that was all part of the strategy there and all part of the strategy of presenting Mays in a somewhat different light.
See,
that was really important to me. And so
that's huge. That's hugely intriguing, right? Because I think that's a subtlety that most folks outside the quote unquote Black experience wouldn't have. I mean, I guess that's probably part of your biggest challenge, right? You said it earlier, right? A lot of the impetus and the focus of this was to reinvent, reorient the exhibit as well as the book through the eyes and the lens of the Black experience, right? And I'm not African American, right? So to understand that nuance or that not so subtle distinction between a Willie Mays approach to Major League Baseball than, say, a Jackie Robinson, right? Obviously, two slightly different eras in the mix, right? And Robinson had a lot more I don't know, chiseling to do, if you will. He took a lot more. I mean, he was the true
Yeah,
pioneer to kind of open the doors before others. But
yeah,
this
that's a fair
idea,
thing to
right?
say.
You mentioned that term Uncle Tom, right? Well, I don't want to sort of circle on it, but what is quote unquote integration, right? What is absorption into the bigger body of organized baseball, right? Where are the lines and the limits of, of standing out, standing up for oneself and the experience and one's place there, as well as, or quote unquote, fitting in with it, right? I mean,
Right.
it's got to be a very gray, literally and figuratively, area, right? Between how to, and there's probably no correct answer to that, right? There are probably different approaches, and I'm sure that even bedevils any kind of minority, let alone just the black player in any kind of sport right now too. It's like there's this combination of, and you can be more eloquent than I can, of duty and sacrifice to be the breakthrough, if you will. But then it's also, how do you then take things to another level where in many respects at a certain time there isn't a difference per se as much anymore, and it shouldn't be, because it's just part of the flow of the game itself. It's an ineloquent way of saying it's got to be tough, especially for these players of this era, to be the pioneers to make that happen, because I'm sure they're being pulled and pushed in so many different directions by their African American brethren, as well as the wider swath of baseball generally. And it's very hard to serve two or three different sort of goals at the same time, and it's impossible, right?
Right. And that's exactly what I wanted to try to get at with Mays, because I remember talking about black sports writer Wendell Smith complaining that Mays was not being outspoken about the civil rights movement and stuff like that. So it's tremendous pressure on Willie
Of
Mays.
course.
I kind of wanted readers to be sympathetic with, because number one, he's the star guy on his team. So he's expected to produce star stats every year. He's expected to produce stats that's going to put him in the top 5 of the most valuable player. I mean, that's tremendous pressure. On top of that, he's supposed to be some kind of exemplar for his race. He's
Right.
supposed to be speaking on behalf of his race. And then, Mays is coming along at the time when the civil rights movement is really taking off, because Mays is coming along in the 50s when the Montgomery bus boycott, Martin Luther King has become a major national figure, and he's playing in the 60s during the sit-ins and all this sort of stuff. So you're right. He is over. He's somewhat overlapped with Jackie Robinson, but Robinson emerged at an earlier time, sort of kind of I mean, Robinson is sort of part of the civil rights movement and sort of what, just as a figure, but he's emerged at a different time. And so there's enormous kind of pressure that I wanted people to be aware of. I wanted people to be cognizant of it in a way in the book. So yeah, I would say that some of it, what I'm doing in the book is I'm telling people some stuff that is not new, but some of it is meant to kind of reorient people in understanding it in a somewhat different way than they may have understood it before. So yeah, I guess in that respect, I was trying to bring a Black perspective to the book and to this stuff, in the same way that the exhibit is doing. That was the other thing too, was that in doing the book with the hall, the idea was not to was to amplify the exhibit. So of course, there's a lot more stuff in the book than there is in the exhibit, and uh, kind of follow the exhibit in some measure. But yeah, the intention was always with me in doing the book, and with the exhibit as well, was that we're going to tell the whole story, and it wasn't just going to be the Negro Leagues. As soon as you say Black baseball, people say, "Oh, the Negro Leagues," for people who know anything about this. And they said, "No, no, no. Black baseball is something beyond the Negro Leagues. Black baseball um, it's something that is a cultural phenomenon in the United States. It's something that's beyond the Negro Leagues, that it runs through the, as you said, as a thread through the culture, and not just in baseball. It runs as a thread through American culture, something called Black baseball.
Yeah,
And so that was what the book tries to convey.
Yeah, it's a foundational tributary, right, into the game of
Yeah.
baseball, right? And to not know about it is to not know about a whole bunch about quote unquote baseball, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. So that's exactly what you're trying to do here. So you're trying to give a different kind of perspective on some of this stuff. Some things got cut from the book. There were some people who were not very well known who got cut from the book for page things, word things and stuff, word limitations and stuff like that. There was a story. There was a player, Hank Thompson, that I wrote about in the book that got cut, partly because his story was an unhappy one, and so the people at the hall felt a little uneasy about a story that didn't end well. And, my feeling was, okay, I get that, but, that's sort of like Black life in America, is that a lot of times it doesn't end well.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
people sort of should know that sometimes
sure.
it doesn't end well.
Yeah, well, I mean, or it's no different than anybody else in life generally, right? I mean,
Yes.
for example, he was one of he was I think he was in the army, right, in World War II.
Yes, that's
Right?
right. He got
So
the
I mean,
nickname Machine Gun.
so that experience wasn't anything different or unique, but most people
No.
kind of overlook that the contributions of Black soldiers and military personnel during the war. I mean, sure, it's come out in various flavors over the years, but I mean, he's a great example. Right? He's a guy who played in the Negro Leagues. He played in the majors, and he also had a war career.
Right.
So right there, that little story, if you will, even though it didn't sort of come to it didn't end well, it is also emblematic, right? And that's just also, and there are just hundreds of players, or at least dozens of players, that are very similar to that, right? So anything that can showcase at least the status quo of that is immensely illustrative. And look, also, I think the book too is very. It's for those who have not yet get it. We'll promote the heck out of this. Don't worry. It's also I would call it, it's sort of coffee table plus, in that it's got real depth to it. It's not just like photos and whatever, but it's accessible, right? It's not a chore. It's visually oriented with substantial background writing behind it. That it's to me, it's almost like a helpful guide. I mean, without looking at this book, you can kind of feel that you're fairly well read about sort of the topic, and arguably it probably makes people want to jump into further depth into particular pieces of it, or maybe the pieces that weren't included.
That's the hope.
Well, let's hope so.
The idea of writing it and making it, that was very important to me, was to making it accessible. And the other thing was that to bind Black baseball with Black American social history. And so, you're getting this flow about Black baseball, and seeing it almost as a kind of social history in some respects. So that was important, but it was very important that it was accessible, that, it wasn't going to be a chore for somebody to read. The hope is that people were going to read it, especially people didn't know very much about the subject, and say, oh, I really didn't know that. I didn't know Frederick Douglass's sons played baseball. So, the hope was that people were going to find it kind of eye-opening about the extent of Black baseball, and, where Black baseball kind of crops up in places where you might not have expected it.
All right, two last questions, and I'm going to let you promote. And again, we're going to promote before, during, and after the show anyway, so don't worry about that. But I want to hear it from your own voice, though. The title, Play Harder, where did that come from?
Okay, that's it. Okay. When we had the first meeting with the publishers about the book, um, normally it would be that with an exhibit, it would take the name of the exhibit. The name of the exhibit is Souls of the Game. So the publisher said that title is too esoteric to me. So I want a different title for the book. And he wanted a title that had to be short, and it had to be something that a black player or some black players actually said. So he had first suggested "Let's Play Two," which was something Ernie Banks had said, and I said, no, I don't think "Let's Play Two" is going to work because there have been two biographies that have come out on Ernie Banks, and both of them are called "Let's Play Two." So that is not going to convey exactly what you want to convey. Plus, it's been used; it's not going to convey what you want to convey, and so forth. So I suggested "Play Harder," and I said, look, if you read Jackie Robinson's "Baseball Has Done It," you'll find that many of the quotes he has in the book are black players talking about the struggles with integration and so forth, and that under the kind of stress they were with integrated baseball, they were forced to play harder. And so I read them all these quotes, from the book, all kinds of people talking about playing harder. And so they said, okay, fine, that's great. It fulfills the two requirements. It's short, and black players actually said this. And so that's how the title came to be, was because of that.
It makes a ton of sense to me, and I think does the job quite well. The second question I have then is, you hinted at the stuff that got cut out. Why do I suspect that you could do another version of this that maybe is a little bit more inclusive and or comprehensive, like perhaps in an encyclopedic form of some sort, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you sense that there's a director's cut, so to speak, that could come out for this, right? Exhibit wise or book wise?
Yeah, I guess yeah, that's interesting. I guess the hall and the publisher, they were the producers and I was the director, if you're going to make a film analogy. Yeah, I mean, I have thought about that. I've thought about the idea of revisiting some of this material in a different kind of context and with a different book. I haven't worked out everything yet about it, but I am thinking about that, going at it with a somewhat different focus, to put in some stuff that didn't get in the first time, and also some other kinds of things. I would be interested in wanting to do it with the hall. My hope would be that they might be interested in wanting to have, well, if we're going to do film analogies here, they'd be interested in wanting to have a sequel.
And do you think
yes, I've thought very much about that.
Do you think there's like I don't know if it's Ken Burns. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate and is probably looking to get out of the business at some point, retire and enjoy the fruits of his labor. But do you think there's a neat documentary kind of version of this that could be done too, or maybe has it been done elsewhere? I don't really think so, but
yeah,
this thread focus, if you will. Because
yeah,
the title already jumps out. It's natural for that. It just feels to me like, that it's worthy of a documentary treatment.
Yeah, I thought about that. As a matter of fact, insofar as how the book is done and how I was thinking about the book, I was thinking about the book in a very cinematic way. I was thinking about the book as a document, and laying out the stories were I had more in mind of it being like a film, in laying out the stories and the vignettes and everything else, that I was trying to give it the flow, in some measure, of the flow of a film, and in presenting the story. So yeah, my hope would be that it could be made into a film. I think it would open itself very well to a film, and I think it'd be a very interesting film, and if done by the right filmmaker, it'd be a very successful film.
Especially with today's players, and I've seen this very successfully done by the NBA in particular, NFL a little bit, but mostly the NBA, in terms of incorporating current players, especially those who are more broadly entrepreneurial outside the game, like Steph Curry and Shaq and others, who also have a penchant for the history or histories of the game and or the Black experience or all those things, right? Where they can credibly and with interest speak notably about what came before them and reverentially tie that to how, their current successes and others around them that have been doors open for such. So you never know who listens to this show. And we've had a lot of great topics that have gotten some of that treatment and stuff. But I think, frankly, you've done the hard work because you've laid out literally the timeline of it all and have circled, the key moments and a little bit of things outside those key moments into a thread, into a narrative. I don't want to say it should be easy to turn that in, but I think you've kind of laid it all out there. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine Major League Baseball, the Major League Players Association, certain players that sort of fit that mold that I was sort of suggesting with NBA players who have a respect and or appreciation and maybe even a nerdy knowledge of the history and would love to exhibit that somehow in a little media offering in a documentary form. So I don't know. I'm thinking out loud, which is dangerous, Doc. I'm sorry, but there you go. It's just, I get 10%. That's all I can tell you.
I hear you.
All right. Our thanks to the good doctor, Professor Gerald Early. Again, you can find him at WashU in St. Louis. If you're an undergraduate and you're lucky enough to take one of his classes, by all means, tell him we sent you and give him a good review for his classwork, because I'm sure it's got to be as good, if not better, than the stuff that yours truly and others like us have enjoyed over the years, either in his contributions and or on-screen performances in the various documentaries we mentioned earlier. And of course, this book, which I highly encourage anyone to get or to give, especially for perhaps an audience of folks who don't fully understand or know sort of the story of Black baseball and, frankly, the Black experience in the United States over the last century plus. It's a wonderfully accessible and enjoyable read. It is called Play Harder, The Triumph of Black Baseball in America. It is by our guest. It is written and collated by our guest this week, Gerald Early, in conjunction with the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. It is available wherever good books are found. And of course, if you go to our website, you can check out our episode number 396, which this is. And there, when you click over there, you'll find a couple of convenient links to the book in both a Kindle and hardcover fashion. We'll get a couple of shekels of referral love when you do that, and we appreciate that to no end. And when you're on the website, of course, you can check out our merch section too for all kinds of other great stuff, including Negro League garb, some jerseys there from our friends at Royal Retros and T-shirts and stuff from our friends at oldschoolshirts.com and all kinds of other stuff related to this specific conversation we had this week, but also just the general diaspora there is of forgotten sports and defunct franchises and leagues and the like we like to obsess about here on this little website. Before we run, I do want to say that the clip that we began the show with was a wonderful setup, but it's very much also worth your time. And if you remember our episode 131 with our pal Byron Motley, well, he was one of the writers of that movie that was directed by Sam Pollard, and I think Questlove had a production hand. It was called The League. Came out in 2023. It is available for purchase or streaming on Amazon Prime and that kind of stuff. And I'll give you a quick tip, and it's a great documentary, probably one of the best I've seen on the Negro Leagues specifically. if you want a little pro tip and not have to shell out bucks to see it, just go to your local library and utilize your library card. And on either Canopy with a K or Hoopla, those are two streaming websites that all you need to do to watch is your library card. So you can actually watch these documentaries commercial free and for free. I think it's also available on Hulu if you want to truly pay. But any which way, you can rent or buy it on Prime, you can stream it on Hulu, or you can watch it without commercials on Canopy with a K or Hoopla, courtesy of your local public library. So by all means, do that too. Our website, again, goodseatsstillavailable.com. Check out our stuff there, all of our episodes there. Make sure you find and follow us on your favorite podcast feeds and catchers. Please, a 5-star rating where you can. Rate, and review. We appreciate that. That helps the algorithm. We're on all the different socials. Go on our website. You'll find those there too. Our email is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And thank you, Jerry Payne, for your audio excellence this week. And thanks for you to listen, to you for listening. That's what I'm trying to say. And I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.